There are some moments in life that never really leave you. You can move to another house. You can change your routine. You can meet new people and build a completely different life. You can even forgive the person who hurt you. But some memories remain exactly where you left them. For me, that memory began on a rainy Tuesday evening. I remember the rain tapping softly against my bedroom window. The sky outside was dark, and the streetlights reflected on the wet road. Everything looked quiet. Too quiet. I was sitting alone at my kitchen table. My hands were trembling. My head was spinning. And the man I had trusted for 32 years was not answering my calls. His name was Daniel. He was my husband. For most of my adult life, I believed Daniel would always be there when I needed him. If I was sick, he would be there. If I was frightened, he would be there. If something went wrong, he would be the first person I called. That was the promise I thought we had made without saying it. We would stay. No matter how difficult life became, we would stay. But that night, Daniel left me. And I never forgot it. What I did not know then was that his leaving would change me in ways I could never have imagined. I did not know that I would spend years asking myself what I had done wrong. I did not know that one day he would return to my door. And I certainly did not know that when he finally told me the truth, I would have to decide whether forgiveness was possible. But before I tell you about that night, I need to tell you about the life Daniel and I built together. Because he was not always the man who walked away. Once, he was the man I believed would never leave. My name is Margaret. When I first met Daniel, I was 26 years old. I was working at a small office in town, and most of my days were simple. Work, home, dinner, sleep. I did not dream about becoming rich or famous. I wanted a peaceful life. I wanted a family. I wanted a home where people felt safe. My parents had raised me to believe that love was shown through small things. A warm meal, a hand on your shoulder, a ride to the doctor, a cup of tea when you were tired. My mother used to say, "You do not need a perfect person. You need someone who knows how to stay." Those words stayed with me. And when I met Daniel, I thought I had found that person. We met outside a grocery store. I was carrying 2 heavy bags. One of them broke. Apples rolled everywhere. Daniel was nearby. He laughed and said, "I think your groceries are trying to escape." I laughed too. He helped me collect the apples. That was our first conversation. It was not dramatic. There was no great moment. Just a few apples on a sidewalk. But I remembered his smile. We started seeing each other after that. First came coffee, then walks, then dinners, then Sunday afternoons together. Daniel was not perfect. He could be stubborn. He sometimes worked too much. He was not very good at talking about his feelings. But he was kind. At least, that was how I knew him. When my father died, Daniel stayed beside me through the funeral. When my mother became sick, he drove me to the hospital. When I caught a bad flu one winter, he came to my house every evening with soup. Those things mattered. They made me trust him. Eventually, he asked me to marry him. I said yes. Our first house was small. 3 bedrooms. 1 bathroom. A tiny kitchen. A backyard that was mostly grass and weeds. But when I walked through the front door for the first time as Daniel's wife, I felt like I had everything. We planted a small tree in the backyard. Daniel dug the hole. I held the tree. Together, we put it into the ground. Daniel looked at it and said, "One day this will be taller than the house." I laughed. "You better remember to water it." He smiled. "I will." He forgot. More than once. But the tree survived. So did we. 3 years later, our daughter Anna was born. I still remember Daniel holding her for the first time. He looked terrified. He kept staring at that tiny baby, as if she were the most fragile thing in the world. I told him, "You can hold her." He whispered, "What if I drop her?" I laughed. "You won't." He looked down at Anna. Then he smiled. That smile stayed in my memory for years. Anna became the center of our lives. There were school mornings, lost shoes, birthday cakes, Christmas decorations, doctor appointments, family dinners, arguments about homework, the usual chaos of raising a child. Daniel worked hard. I managed the home. We were not wealthy, but we had enough. And I thought enough was all anyone needed. As Anna grew older, she became very close to her father. She followed him everywhere. When he repaired something in the garage, she sat nearby. When he worked in the backyard, she helped. When she learned to ride a bicycle, Daniel was the one holding the back of the seat. I stood on the porch watching them. Anna kept shouting, "Don't let go." Daniel would answer, "I won't." Eventually he did. Anna rode by herself. She looked back and screamed with happiness. Daniel stood there smiling. I remember looking at them and thinking, this is my family. For many years, I believed nothing could change that. Then Anna grew up. She went to college. After college, she moved to another city for work. The house became quieter. At first, Daniel and I enjoyed having more time together. We took walks. We cooked. We watched television in the evenings. On weekends, we sat beneath the tree we had planted years before. Sometimes Daniel would look at it and say, "Can you believe how big it is?" I would smile. "You forgot to water it." He would laugh. Only a few times. Those small conversations were enough for me. Then something began to change. It happened slowly. So slowly that I almost ignored it. Daniel began coming home later. He spent more time looking at his phone. He seemed distracted during dinner. Sometimes I would talk to him and realize he had not heard a word I said. I asked him once, "Are you worried about something?" He shook his head. "I'm just tired." I believed him. Or maybe I wanted to. A few months later, he told me he needed to travel for work. I packed his suitcase. I folded his shirts. I placed his favorite sweater inside because the weather was cold. Before leaving, he kissed my forehead. "I'll call you." I smiled. "Be careful." He left. But the calls became shorter, then less frequent. When he returned, I noticed something different in him. He was physically in our home, but his mind seemed somewhere else. I asked him again, "Daniel, is something wrong?" He looked away. No. I wanted to believe him. After 32 years together, I knew his face. I knew his silence. I knew when he was hiding something. But I also knew that people sometimes needed time. So I gave him space. That was one of my biggest mistakes. Not because giving someone space is wrong, but because sometimes silence allows a problem to grow. I did not know it then. I only knew that the man sitting across from me at dinner did not feel like the same man who had once held my hand at my father's funeral. Something was slipping away, and I was afraid to ask what it was. I would soon find out. But by then, I would already be standing on the edge of a life I did not recognize. And the hardest part was that I still loved him. I still believed he loved me. I still believed that if something terrible happened, he would come running. I did not know that the test of that belief was coming, and it would come sooner than I expected. The first warning came on an ordinary morning. I woke up feeling dizzy. At first, I thought I had simply stood up too quickly. I walked to the bathroom and held the sink. The room seemed to move around me. I closed my eyes. After a few minutes, the feeling passed. I told myself it was nothing. I was getting older. Maybe I had not eaten enough. Maybe I was tired. I made breakfast. I did not tell Daniel. That afternoon, it happened again. This time it lasted longer. I sat down at the kitchen table and waited. When Daniel came home, I almost told him. But he looked tired. He put his keys on the counter and barely spoke. I asked, "How was your day?" "Long." "Everything okay?" "Yes." He walked past me. I watched him. There was something distant in his eyes. I wanted to ask him what was happening between us. Instead, I said, "Dinner will be ready soon." He nodded. That night, we ate almost in silence. I kept looking at him. He kept looking at his plate. I wanted to say, "Please tell me what is wrong." But I was afraid of the answer. Sometimes we delay difficult conversations because we think not knowing is safer. It isn't. Not knowing only gives fear more room to grow. A few days later, I became sick again. This time, I could barely stand. I called Daniel. He did not answer. I called again. Nothing. I left a message. "Daniel, please call me when you get this. I don't feel well." I waited. No call. That evening the rain began. It was a soft rain at first, then heavier. I sat in the kitchen. The clock moved slowly. 7, 8, 9. Daniel still had not come home. I called him again. No answer. I started feeling frightened. I called Anna. She answered immediately. Mom. I tried to sound calm. Anna, I'm not feeling very well. Her voice changed. What happened? I'm dizzy. Are you alone? I looked toward the hallway. Yes. Where's Dad? I swallowed. I don't know. There was silence. Then Anna said, I'm coming. She lived almost 2 hours away. I told her not to drive too fast. She said, Mom, I'm coming. I sat back down. I stared at Daniel's empty chair. For 32 years, that chair had been occupied by the same man. That night, it looked like a symbol of everything I had lost without realizing it. At 11:15, I heard a car outside. I thought it was Anna. But it was Daniel. He walked inside. His coat was dry. His face was calm. He looked at me. Then he looked at the clock. Why are you awake? I stared at him. I called you. He took off his coat. I didn't hear my phone. I called several times. He paused. I know. My heart sank. You knew. He nodded. I saw the calls. I could not understand. You saw them and didn't call? He looked uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say. I whispered. You could have asked if I was okay. He looked down. I knew then. Something was seriously wrong. He sat down. I remained standing. Then he said the words that changed my life. I can't do this anymore. I looked at him. Do what? He said nothing. Daniel, what are you saying? He finally looked at me. Us. My heart seemed to stop. What about us? I'm leaving. I sat down. The room became very quiet. Tonight? He nodded. Where are you going? He did not answer. I asked again. Where are you going? He finally said, I have somewhere to stay. I knew. There was someone else. I did not need him to say it. I asked, how long? He looked confused. How long what? How long have you been planning to leave? He looked down. That silence told me more than any answer could. I felt tears forming. But I did not cry. Not yet. I asked, do you love someone else? He took a breath. Yes. The word was quiet, but it felt like something had broken inside my chest. I thought about all those years. The tree. The house. Anna. The hospital. My father's funeral. Our first Christmas. The birth of our daughter. All of it. And now another woman had become more important to him than the life we built. I asked, why didn't you tell me? I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of hurting you. I looked at him. You hurt me more by hiding it. He nodded. I know. I wanted to be angry, but I was too tired. I was sick. I had spent the entire evening alone, afraid something was wrong with me. And now the person I expected to protect me was telling me he was leaving. I whispered, I needed you tonight. He looked at me. I know. No. My voice broke. You don't know. He remained silent. I continued. I was scared. I called you. You knew I was sick, and you still didn't come home. He lowered his head. I am sorry. Those words felt empty. I had spent years believing that love meant being there when it mattered. That night, Daniel showed me that he no longer wanted that responsibility. He stood. I think I should go. I nodded. Before he reached the door, I asked one last question. Did you ever love me? He stopped. For a long time he said nothing. Then he whispered, yes. He opened the door. Rain filled the darkness outside. He walked away. The door closed. I stood there, alone. The house was silent. Then I heard a car pull away. That sound stayed with me for years. Anna arrived 20 minutes later. She came through the door and found me sitting at the table. She looked at me. Then she looked toward the empty hallway. She understood. She walked over and hugged me. I held her tightly. She whispered, I'm here, Mom. I closed my eyes. For the first time that night, I felt safe. Not because everything was okay. It wasn't. But because someone had stayed. The next morning, I woke up to a different life. Daniel's side of the bed was empty. His clothes were gone. His toothbrush was gone. His shoes were gone. But his absence was everywhere. I walked through the house and remembered him in every room. The kitchen. The hallway. The garage. The backyard. The living room. 32 years had filled that house with memories. Now those memories felt like ghosts. I spent the first weeks asking myself questions. What had I missed? When had he stopped loving me? Was there something I could have done? Had I become too ordinary? Too old? Too boring? I knew those questions were unfair. But pain does not always ask fair questions. It simply asks. And sometimes you spend years trying to answer. Daniel moved into another place. I later learned that the woman was named Laura. He had been seeing her for months. That knowledge hurt more than I expected. Not because I wanted him back, but because it meant that while I was sitting at home believing we were still a family, he had already built another life. I felt foolish. But I also began to understand something. I had been trying to save a marriage that Daniel had already left emotionally. The hardest part was accepting that I could not save something alone. Anna stayed with me for several days. She cooked. She cleaned. She checked on me. One morning she said, "Mom, you don't have to pretend you're okay." I looked at her. "I'm not." She held my hand. "You don't have to be." That sentence gave me permission to grieve. So I did. I cried. I slept. I barely ate. I looked at old photographs. Sometimes I laughed. Sometimes I cried. Sometimes I did both. I slowly began packing Daniel's belongings. His shirts. His books. His old watch. His tools. I placed everything in boxes. Then I put the boxes in the spare room. I closed the door. I did not want to see them. I was not ready to let go. But I was beginning to learn that letting go did not mean forgetting. It meant accepting that the life I had imagined was over. And that meant I had to find a new way to live. The first year without Daniel was the hardest. People think the hardest part of separation is the day someone leaves. For me, it was not. The hardest part was all the ordinary days that came afterward. Monday mornings, Saturday evenings, Sunday dinners, birthdays, holidays. Those were the moments when his absence became real. On the first Sunday after he left, I cooked too much food. I made enough for 2 people. Then I looked at the table. 1 plate, 1 glass, 1 chair. I stood there for a long time. Then I put the extra food into containers. I told myself I would get used to cooking for one. I did. Eventually. But it took time. Daniel called occasionally. At first, his calls were about practical things. Documents. Bills. The house. Then he stopped calling. I did not chase him. I wanted to. There were nights when I picked up my phone and stared at his name. I wanted to ask him if he was happy. I wanted to ask if he missed me. I wanted to ask if he regretted leaving. But I never called. My pride was not the reason. My healing was. Every conversation reopened the wound. So I stopped. I started taking morning walks. At first, I could barely walk around the block. Then I walked farther. I joined a small community group. I began talking to people again. I discovered that I had spent years being someone's wife and someone's mother. I had forgotten how to simply be Margaret. That realization frightened me. But it also gave me freedom. I began doing small things for myself. I bought a chair I liked. I painted the kitchen. I planted flowers. I learned how to fix a leaking faucet. I started reading again. Little by little, the house became mine. Not ours. Mine. That difference mattered. Anna visited whenever she could. She worried about me. I told her I was fine. She would smile and say, "You're getting there." She was right. I was getting there. Then Anna gave me news that changed my life again. She was pregnant. I cried when she told me. I hugged her. I placed my hand gently on her stomach. I remember thinking that life had a strange way of giving us something new after taking something away. When my grandson Noah was born, I felt something inside me change. The first time I held him, he opened his eyes. I whispered, "Hello, little one." He grabbed my finger. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, I was not thinking about Daniel. I was thinking about life. New life. Hope. I spent more time with Anna and Noah. I laughed again. I cooked. I walked. I gardened. I became busy. But I did not forget. Sometimes I still remembered that rainy night. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if Daniel had answered the phone. Maybe he would have come home. Maybe he would have stayed. Maybe everything would have been different. But eventually I stopped asking those questions. Because there is no answer to a life that never happened. 2 years passed. Then 3. By the 4th year, I rarely thought about Daniel. I had forgiven myself for not seeing the signs. I had stopped blaming myself. I had accepted that his choice was his responsibility. I thought the story was over. Then one morning, someone knocked on my door. I was holding a cup of tea. I opened it. Daniel was standing there. For a moment, I did not recognize him. His hair was mostly gray. His face looked older. He seemed tired. He looked at me. "Hello, Margaret." I held the door. "Hello, Daniel." He swallowed. "Can I come in?" I hesitated. Then I stepped aside. He entered. The house was different. He looked around. "You changed things." I did. He smiled faintly. "It looks nice." "Thank you." We sat in the living room. The same room where we had celebrated so many birthdays. The same room where Anna had opened presents. The same room where we had once watched movies together. Daniel looked at me. "I owe you an explanation." I said nothing. He continued. "Laura and I are not together." I nodded. "I know." He looked surprised. "How? People talk." He lowered his head. "I deserved that." I did not answer. He took a deep breath. "I made a terrible mistake." Those words were simple. But they were the words I had once wanted to hear. Years earlier, I would have given anything to hear them. Now they were not enough. I asked, "Why did you come here?" He said, "Because I need you to know the truth." I waited. He told me everything. Laura had been someone he met through work. At first they talked. Then they became friends. Then the friendship became something more. Daniel told himself that he had fallen in love. But he later realized he had been running away. He had become afraid of aging. He was afraid of becoming dependent. He watched friends get sick. He saw people lose their health. He began to believe that his life was becoming smaller. Instead of sharing those fears with me, he blamed our marriage. He blamed our routine. He blamed the house. He blamed everything except himself. He thought another life would make him feel young again. It didn't. He said Laura eventually realized that the man she had fallen for was unhappy. Their relationship became difficult. They argued. They separated. And Daniel was left alone. He told me he had wanted to call me many times. But he was ashamed. I looked at him. "You should have called." "I know. You could have apologized." "I know. You could have asked if I was okay." He looked down. "I was afraid you would hate me." I shook my head. "I never hated you." He looked up. "I didn't." "No." I paused. "I hated what you did." His eyes filled with tears. "But I never hated you." That was the truth. For years, I had thought forgiveness meant pretending he had not hurt me. Now I understood differently. Forgiveness meant accepting the truth without allowing it to destroy me. I asked him one final question. "Why did you leave me that night?" He answered quietly. "Because I had already decided to leave. I was too selfish to care that you were sick." That was the hardest truth. Not the affair. Not Laura. Not the years of silence. The hardest truth was that when I needed him, he chose himself. I looked at him. Then I said, "That is what I will never forget." He nodded. "I know." Daniel stayed for almost 2 hours that morning. We talked about things we had avoided for years. There was no shouting. No anger. Only honesty. He told me he regretted leaving. He regretted missing years of Anna's life. He regretted not seeing Noah grow. He regretted losing the family he had built. But most of all, he regretted the way he had left me. He said, "I should have stayed that night." I looked at him. "Yes." He nodded. "I should have taken you to the doctor." "Yes." "I should have been there." "Yes." He wiped his eyes. "I cannot change it." "No. I wish I could." "I know." There was a long silence. Then he asked, Do you ever think about us? I looked toward the window. Sometimes. Do you ever wish I had stayed? I thought carefully. Years ago, yes. And now? I turned toward him. Now I am grateful you left. He looked surprised. I continued. Not because you didn't hurt me. You did. But because your leaving forced me to find myself. He nodded slowly. I understand. I did not know whether he truly understood. But I no longer needed him to. That was another thing I had learned. Healing does not require the person who hurt you to understand everything. Sometimes you heal without their help. Sometimes you heal without their apology. Sometimes you heal without closure. And sometimes closure arrives years later, sitting across from you in your own living room. Daniel asked if I had forgiven him. I said, yes. His face changed. He looked relieved. But I quickly added, forgiving you does not mean we can go back. He nodded. I understand. I don't want the old life. Why? Because I built a new one. He looked around. I see that. I smiled. I am happy. He smiled too. I am glad. I believed him. For the first time, I believed that he was not there to get something from me. He simply wanted to say what he should have said years earlier. Before he left, he stood near the door. He looked at the hallway, then at the kitchen, then at me. I remember when we first moved here. So do I. We were so young. We were. I thought we would grow old together. I looked at him. So did I. He lowered his eyes. I'm sorry I changed that. I said, people change. I changed badly. Yes. He smiled sadly. You're still honest. I always was. He laughed softly. For a moment, it felt almost normal. Then he opened the door. Before stepping outside, he said, can I see Noah sometime? I thought about it. Ask Anna. He nodded. Okay. Then he walked away. I closed the door. This time, I did not cry. I stood there quietly. I realized something. The man who had once walked out of that door had taken a part of me with him. But the man who had just walked out had left nothing behind. I was whole. That was how I knew I had healed. Over the next few years, Daniel became a distant but respectful part of our family. He saw Noah occasionally. He attended Anna's birthday dinners. He helped when something needed fixing. We were never husband and wife again. But we learned how to be two people who had once loved each other, and no longer needed to hurt one another. Some people might not understand that. They might ask why I allowed him back into our lives. The answer is simple. Because forgiveness gave me control. I was no longer reacting to what he had done. I was choosing what I wanted to do next. There is a difference. When someone hurts you, they may control the past. But they do not have to control the future. I could forgive him without forgetting. I could be kind without becoming his wife again. I could let him see his grandson without pretending our marriage had never ended. That balance took time. But I found it. One afternoon, I was sitting under the old tree. The tree Daniel and I had planted when we were young. Its branches were wide now. Its trunk was thick. It had survived storms, cold winters, hot summers, neglect. And somehow it had kept growing. I thought about my own life. I had survived too. I had been neglected. I had been hurt. I had been left. But I had kept growing. That thought made me smile. Anna came outside with Noah. He ran toward me. Grandma. I opened my arms. He climbed onto my lap. Anna sat beside me. She looked at the tree. It's beautiful. I said, your father and I planted it. She smiled. I remember. I looked at her. Do you ever hate him for what he did? She thought for a moment. No. I was surprised. She said. I was angry for a long time. So was I. But he's still my father. I nodded. Then she said, and you're still my mother. I smiled. That was enough. Family is complicated. People disappoint us. People make mistakes. Sometimes they leave. Sometimes they return. But love does not always have to look perfect. Sometimes love is simply learning how to live with the truth. Many years have passed since that rainy Tuesday evening. Sometimes I still remember it. I remember sitting at the kitchen table. I remember calling Daniel. I remember him walking through the door. I remember him saying, "I can't do this anymore." I remember watching him leave. I remember feeling as if my entire life had disappeared in one night. But the memory no longer controls me. That is the difference between remembering pain and living inside it. For a long time, I thought healing meant forgetting. I wanted to forget Daniel. I wanted to forget the rain. I wanted to forget the empty chair. I wanted to forget the loneliness. But forgetting was impossible. So I learned something better. I learned how to remember without hurting myself. I can remember that night and still smile today. I can remember being abandoned and still believe in love. I can remember being disappointed and still trust people. I can remember Daniel and still be grateful for the life I have now. That is what forgiveness gave me. Not my old marriage. Not my old life. Something better. Peace. Real peace. I sometimes think about the young woman I was when I first met Daniel. She was 26. She believed love meant staying forever. She believed marriage could protect you from loneliness. She believed if you gave someone enough love, they would return it. I wish I could talk to her now. I would tell her something different. I would say, love someone deeply, but do not lose yourself. I would say, build a family but remember that you are a person too. I would say, if someone leaves, grieve them, but do not let their decision convince you that you are not worthy. And most importantly, I would tell her that being left is not the end. Sometimes it is the beginning of a life you never knew you needed. After Daniel left, I discovered parts of myself I had forgotten. I became more confident. I became more independent. I made new friends. I learned new things. I spent more time with Anna. I watched Noah grow. I traveled. I laughed. I planted flowers. I sat quietly with my morning coffee. I learned to enjoy my own company. And that last one may have been the greatest gift. Because for years, I was afraid of being alone. Now I understand that being alone and being lonely are not the same. You can be lonely beside someone. And you can be peaceful by yourself. I learned that peace is not always loud. Sometimes peace is waking up without fear. Sometimes it is eating breakfast alone and enjoying it. Sometimes it is sitting beneath a tree and hearing birds. Sometimes it is looking at your phone and realizing you no longer care whether someone has called. Sometimes peace is simply knowing that whatever happens, you will be okay. I reached that place eventually. Not quickly. Not easily. But I reached it. Daniel once asked me if I regretted marrying him. I told him no. That surprised him. But I meant it. I do not regret my marriage. I do not regret Anna. I do not regret the years we shared. I do not regret the tree. I do not regret the memories. I only regret that we stopped being honest with each other. But even that regret taught me something. Silence can become a wall. If something is hurting you, speak. If you are afraid, speak. If you are unhappy, speak. Do not wait until the person beside you becomes a stranger. I wish Daniel had understood that. Maybe our story would have been different. Maybe not. We will never know. But I no longer live inside that question. I have accepted that some questions do not have answers. Some people enter our lives and stay forever. Some stay for a season. Some leave before we are ready. And some return only after we have learned how to live without them. Daniel was all three. He was my husband. Then he was a stranger. Then he became someone I could forgive. That is not the ending I imagined. But it is the ending I have. And I am at peace with it. Sometimes I see him at family gatherings. We sit at different ends of the table. Anna talks. Noah tells us stories. Everyone laughs. Daniel looks older now. So do I. Sometimes our eyes meet. We smile. Nothing more is needed. There is no bitterness. No longing. Just two people who know what happened. Two people who remember. And two people who have chosen peace. I think that is enough. I still remember the night he left me when I needed him most. I will never pretend that it did not hurt. It changed me, but not in the way I once feared. It did not make me bitter. It made me wiser. It taught me that I could survive something I once thought would destroy me. It taught me that my daughter's love could carry me through a night when my husband's love failed me. It taught me that family can change shape, And it taught me that forgiveness is not weakness. Forgiveness is sometimes the strongest thing you can give yourself. Because when you forgive, you stop waiting for the past to become different. You accept it. Then you turn toward the future. That is what I did. I turned toward my future. I became a grandmother. I became a friend. I became a woman who could sit alone and feel complete. I became Margaret again. Not Daniel's wife. Not the woman he left. Just Margaret. And I like her. I like the woman I became. If you are listening to my story and someone has left you when you needed them most, I want you to know something. Your pain is real. Do not be ashamed of it. If you need to cry, cry. If you need time, take it. You do not have to pretend you are strong every day. Healing is not a straight road. Some mornings will be good. Some nights will be difficult. You may think you are finally over it, and then one small memory will bring everything back. That does not mean you have failed. It simply means you are human. Keep going. One day, the memory will become softer. One day, you will hear their name without your heart racing. One day, you will look back and realize you survived. And one day, you may even be grateful for the strength you found because of what happened. I never forgot that Daniel left me, but I also never forgot what happened after he left. I found my daughter. I found my grandson. I found my friends. I found my confidence. And most importantly, I found myself. The night Daniel left, I thought my life was ending. I was wrong. It was changing. And sometimes change arrives looking like heartbreak. Sometimes it arrives through a closed door. Sometimes it arrives through an empty chair. Sometimes it arrives through the person you trusted most walking away. But a closed door does not mean your story is over. It may simply mean that one chapter has ended. There are still pages left. I know that now. I have lived enough years to understand that life rarely gives us exactly what we ask for. But sometimes it gives us something we need. Daniel gave me 32 years of memories. His leaving gave me pain. But healing gave me freedom. And forgiveness gave me peace. So yes, he left me when I needed him most. And I never forgot. But I also learned that remembering does not mean remaining broken. I remembered. I healed. I forgave. And then I continued living. That was my real victory. Not getting Daniel back. Not making him regret leaving. Not proving that I was worth loving. My victory was waking up one morning and realizing that I no longer needed anyone who had chosen to leave me. I was enough. I had always been enough. I just needed time to believe it. And now, when I sit beneath that old tree in my backyard, I sometimes place my hand against its trunk. I remember two young people planting it. I remember the promise Daniel made. One day this will be taller than the house. He was right. It became taller than the house. And somehow, after all these years, I think that tree reminds me of something. People can leave. Promises can break. Homes can become quiet. But life keeps growing. Even after storms. Even after loss. Even after heartbreak. Life keeps growing. And so did I. That is the part of my story I will never forget.